That hair doesn't belong in first class. The words weren't whispered. They cut through the busy terminal like a blade, sharp and final. Rebecca Stone stood at Gate 42B at Denver International Airport. Her Navy uniform pressed to perfection, her smile plastic and practiced. But her eyes had already passed judgment. The young man in front of her, Devon Mitchell, 18 years old, stood 6 feet tall in a charcoal gray suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His dreadlocks, 6 years of careful growth, hung past his shoulders like a crown of twisted gold and brown. Each lock told a story. Each one had been lovingly maintained, twisted and retwisted by hands that understood their significance. But Rebecca Stone saw none of that dignity. She saw a target. Devon wasn't just any teenager flying to Washington, D.C. He was the valedictorian of Denver Prep Academy, a national scholar, the youngest keynote speaker ever invited to address the National Youth Leadership Summit. His speech, titled "Carrying History Forward," was scheduled for tomorrow morning at the Kennedy Center. 3 senators, the Secretary of Education, and over 2,000 students would be listening. But Rebecca had developed what she called her professional instincts over 15 years of flying. And her instincts screamed, wrong passenger, wrong seat, wrong hair. Devon's story with his crown began when he was 12. His paternal grandmother, Nana Rose, had pulled him aside one Sunday after church and run her weathered fingers through his short, coiled hair. "Baby," she had said, her voice carrying the weight of generations, "your crown reflects your story. These locks aren't just hair. They're armor. They're history. They're the resistance our ancestors wore when they refused to let the world break their spirits." She told him about his great-great-grandfather, a man who had walked off a plantation in Mississippi with nothing but the clothes on his back and hair that reached his waist, twisted into ropes of defiance. Warriors from the motherland who wore their hair as crowns. Freedom fighters who refused to cut their identity to fit someone else's vision of respectability. "Your hair grows up toward heaven, Devon," Nana Rose had whispered. "Don't you ever let anyone convince you to cut your connection to your ancestors, to your power, to yourself." From that day forward, Devon's hair became his daily meditation. Every morning, oil section twist. 30 minutes of ritual. 30 minutes of honoring generations. His father, Jonathan Mitchell, would sometimes watch from the doorway, remembering his own teenage compromises when he had traded authenticity for corporate acceptance. Never again, Jonathan had promised himself. He had raised Devon to believe excellence didn't require erasure. Now, at Gate 42B, Devon held his first-class boarding pass steady. Flight 847 to Washington, D.C. was boarding in 10 minutes. His speech was loaded, practiced, perfected. He was ready to represent his generation, his community, his ancestors. He was ready for everything except Rebecca Stone's scissors. Rebecca had grown up in suburban Colorado Springs, in a house where differences were discussed in whispers and judgments were passed down like family heirlooms. Her father, a retired police officer, had filled dinner conversations with stories about troublemakers and types of people who didn't respect authority. "Some people just need boundaries," he'd say, cutting his steak with surgical precision. "It's not personal. It's practical." Rebecca had internalized that lesson. Boundaries weren't cruelty. They were kindness, structure, order. The fact that her boundaries always seemed to target black bodies, that was just coincidence. Over 15 years with Skyward Airlines, Rebecca had developed an internal classification system. Passengers fell into categories: easy, difficult, and watch closely. The watch closely category had patterns she'd never admit aloud, but always acted upon. She had never been written up, never been officially reprimanded. Supervisors praised her attention to detail, her ability to spot potential problems before they escalated. What they didn't know was that Rebecca's problems usually shared one characteristic. They looked different from her. Rebecca's father had been right about boundaries. She was providing them. She was protecting standards, professional standards, American standards, standards that somehow always required black people to become smaller. Devon approached her podium with quiet confidence, boarding pass-ready smile, genuine. He had learned from his father that respect was earned through consistency, that excellence spoke louder than words. "Good morning, Devon," said his voice clear and warm. "First class seat, 2A. Rebecca looked at him, then at his pass, then back at his hair. Her professional radar activated immediately. Young black male, expensive clothes that might be borrowed, natural hair that screamed nonconformity, first-class seat that probably wasn't legitimate. "Sir," she said the word sharp and cold as winter before you board, "I need to discuss your appearance." The words hit Devon like ice water. Around them, other passengers paused. Some looked up from phones. Others pretended not to hear, but shifted closer. "My appearance." Devon repeated, his voice steady, but his chest tightening. "Is there a problem with my ticket?" Rebecca glanced around, noting the growing attention. Good. Witnesses would see her maintaining standards. "Your hair violates grooming policy for premium passengers," she announced, loud enough for nearby travelers to hear clearly. "Skyward Airlines maintains professional standards." The lie came easily. There was no such policy. But Rebecca had learned that confidence could create truth, that authority could manufacture rules when needed. Devon blinked, processing. His dreadlocks were clean, neat, tied back professionally. His suit was immaculate. His boarding pass was legitimate. "Ma'am," Devon said carefully, "my hair is well maintained. I'm dressed appropriately. What policy am I violating?" Nearby, Carlos Rivera, a 34-year-old documentary filmmaker from Phoenix, slowly raised his phone. Something felt wrong. The teenager was clearly well-dressed, well-spoken, respectful. The flight attendant's tone was aggressive, performative. Maria Santos, the gate agent who had processed Devon's boarding pass moments earlier, watched from behind her counter. She had seen Devon's identification, his first-class ticket, his polite demeanor. Nothing suggested any problem except the color of his skin and the texture of his hair. Rebecca reached into her service bag and pulled out a laminated sheet that looked official, but wasn't. Vague language about professional appearance standards and maintaining cabin atmosphere. No mention of hair texture, but enough bureaucratic speak to sound authoritative. "This clearly states," Rebecca said, pointing to meaningless corporate language, "that premium cabin passengers must maintain appearance consistent with professional standards. Your current hairstyle doesn't meet those standards." Then she reached into her bag again and pulled out scissors. The silver blades caught the fluorescent gate lighting like a weapon being drawn. The metallic sound of them opening rang through the boarding area like a bell tolling. Snick. Devon's world shifted. The busy airport became distant, muffled. The scissors in Rebecca's hands became the only thing in focus. Sharp, silver, surgical. "Cut it or catch the next flight," Rebecca said, her voice now carrying ultimatum weight. She raised the scissors higher. "Your choice." Time slowed. The boarding area, filled with business travelers and families, seemed to hold its breath. Carlos Rivera's phone was now openly recording. Maria Santos had stepped from behind her counter. Jennifer Walsh, a white marketing executive from Seattle, stopped scrolling emails and stared. Jennifer remembered her own son's first flight at Devon's age. How the gate agent had smiled, called him young man, treated him like royalty. This black teenager, better dressed than most adults, was being treated like a criminal. She started recording. Devon looked at the scissors, then at Rebecca's face, then at the growing crowd of witnesses. His Nana Rose's voice whispered in memory, "Your crown reflects your story, baby." Don't you ever let anyone convince you to cut your connection to your ancestors. But he was 18, alone, 3 states from home, facing a woman with scissors and institutional authority behind her. His flight was boarding. His speech was tomorrow. His future was waiting. And a stranger wanted to cut away 6 years of his identity because she decided it didn't belong in first class. Meanwhile, 200 miles away in San Francisco, Jonathan Mitchell sat in a glass-walled conference room on the 52nd floor of TechCore Industries building. Around him, 12 of the most powerful people in Silicon Valley discussed artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and federal contracts that could reshape their industry. Jonathan, at 46, had built TechCore from a 2-person garage startup to a $3.2 billion global empire. His innovations in cloud-based security systems protected data for governments, hospitals, financial institutions worldwide. He sat on university boards, advised senators on technology policy, graced magazine covers. But none of that mattered when his phone vibrated against mahogany. He glanced at the screen. Nana Rose. His mother never called during business hours unless something was catastrophically wrong. Jonathan excused himself and stepped into the hallway. "Mama," he answered, his voice immediately shifting from corporate executive to concerned son. "Jonathan." Nana Rose's voice was shaking. "Something's wrong. Devon called me crying. Some woman at the airport, some flight attendant. She's got scissors, baby. She's trying to cut his hair right there at the gate in front of everybody. She's humiliating our boy." The words hit Jonathan like a physical blow. His son, his brilliant, gentle, powerful son, the boy who had spent 6 years growing his crown with pride, who quoted Maya Angelou and played chess and volunteered at homeless shelters. His son was under attack, where Jonathan's voice had changed. The CEO was gone. The father had emerged. Denver Airport. He tried calling you, but you were in that meeting. Jonathan, they're treating him like he's nothing, like his hair makes him dangerous. Jonathan closed his eyes. He saw Devon at 12, asking permission to start growing locks. At 15, standing taller as his hair grew longer, confidence building with every inch. Last week, practicing his speech in their living room, locks pulled back professionally, eyes bright with purpose. His son, his pride, his legacy, being humiliated by a stranger with scissors and a uniform. Mama, Jonathan said, his voice deadly calm. "Send me everything. Flight number, airline, gate, any video. Send it now." He hung up and stood in the hallway for exactly 10 seconds, transforming. The polished executive in the $3,000 suit became something more dangerous. A black father with power connections and absolutely nothing to lose. Jonathan opened his phone's contact list, scrolling past normal entries to a special section. Numbers that didn't need introductions. People who answered immediately. People who moved mountains with single phone calls. He had spent 25 years building this network, creating alliances, establishing power. For moments exactly like this one. His son was being attacked, 200 miles away. Time to remind the world what happened when you targeted a Mitchell family crown. The scissors were 6 inches from Devon's hair when his phone buzzed. "Dad." The scissors gleamed under fluorescent lights. Gate 42B had 3 minutes until final boarding. 3 minutes for dignity. 3 minutes for history. Rebecca Stone had no idea she was about to lose everything. Devon's phone buzzed against his chest as he stood frozen, staring at the silver blades in Rebecca's trembling hand. The boarding area around them had transformed into something resembling a coliseum, with passengers gathering in an unconscious circle around the unfolding confrontation. Carlos Rivera adjusted his phone-angle documentary instincts, screaming that he was witnessing something historically significant, something that would matter beyond this moment. Ma'am, Devon said, his voice steady despite the earthquake in his chest. Cutting my hair violates federal civil rights law. He paused, letting the legal weight settle. This is who I am. Rebecca's grip tightened on the scissors. 15 years of flying had taught her that authority worked best when applied swiftly and publicly. Hesitation invited challenge. Cut it or leave, she snapped back. I'm not running a debate club. From behind the United counter, Maria Santos stepped forward. She had processed hundreds of passengers that morning, but Devon had stood out for all the right reasons. Polite, well-dressed, legitimate first-class ticket traveling alone to what he had mentioned was an important speaking engagement. Excuse me, Maria called out, her voice cutting through the tension. I processed this young man's ticket. There's nothing wrong with his appearance or documentation. Rebecca turned toward Maria, her professional smile never wavering, but her eyes flashing with irritation. Stay in your lane, lady. Rebecca's mask slipped completely. This is my airline. The dismissal was sharp, public, calculated to embarrass Maria back into silence. But Maria Santos had grown up in East LA, daughter of immigrants who taught her that silence in the face of injustice was complicity. My lane includes passenger protection, Maria replied, stepping closer. And this looks like assault with a deadly weapon. The phrase deadly weapon rippled through the growing crowd like an electric current. Passengers who had been pretending not to watch now turned full attention to the confrontation. Business travelers paused phone calls. Families stopped corralling children. The gate area buzzed with the energy of people realizing they were witnessing something significant. Jennifer Walsh had initially been annoyed by the disruption to her boarding process. But watching this unfold, she remembered her own son's first airplane ride. How the flight attendant had asked if his ticket was real. How she had said nothing. Not this time. Jennifer pulled out her phone and began recording. This is being documented, she announced loud enough for everyone to hear. Whatever happens here is going on record. Rebecca's jaw tightened. Multiple cameras now pointed in her direction. But backing down wasn't in her nature. In 15 years, she had learned that passengers respected strength, feared authority. She had never let a challenge go unanswered. Document whatever you want, Rebecca said, raising her voice so the entire gate could hear. This young man is violating clearly stated grooming policies. If he wants to fly first class, he'll meet first class standards. She opened and closed the scissors twice. Snick, snick. The metallic sound cut through the air like a threat. Devon felt the weight of every eye in the terminal. His chest was tight, his palms damp, but his voice remained steady. 6 years of his grandmother's teachings echoed dignity under attack, grace under pressure, strength in the face of hatred. Ma'am, my hair is part of my cultural identity, Devon said, his voice carrying across the gate area. What you're asking is illegal. He was right. Devon had studied constitutional law as part of his debate team preparation. Religious and cultural expression was protected. Forced alteration of appearance based on racial bias was a civil rights violation. But Rebecca Stone had never been stopped by law. She had been protected by policy, shielded by procedure, enabled by institutional silence. Cultural identity. Rebecca laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. Son, this is about hygiene. Those things in your hair are unsanitary for enclosed cabin space. The slur was subtle but unmistakable. Those things. Not hair, not locks. Things. Carlos Rivera's camera captured the exact moment Devon's face changed. Not anger. Not fear. Something deeper. The look of a young man realizing his humanity was being questioned by a stranger with scissors. My hair is clean, Devon said quietly. Well maintained. I oil it daily. Wash it twice weekly. Keep it professionally styled. There is nothing unsanitary about my hair. That's not for you to decide, Rebecca replied. She stepped closer, scissors visible in her right hand. Cabin crew determines passenger suitability. I'm determining that your appearance is unsuitable for premium seating. Dr. Patricia Williams, a constitutional law professor at University of Colorado and mother of 3 black sons, had been waiting at a nearby gate when the commotion drew her attention. She approached the growing crowd, immediately understanding what she was witnessing. "Excuse me, Dr. Williams," said her voice carrying courtroom authority. "Young man, what's your name and age?" "Devon Mitchell, ma'am." 18. Devon. "I'm a federal attorney. What this woman is doing is assault with a deadly weapon." She turned to Rebecca, her voice growing steel-sharp. "Those scissors? That's a weapon when you threaten a minor." Rebecca faced this new challenger, sizing her up. Professional woman, well-dressed, clearly educated, dangerous. "Ma'am, this is airline business. Please return to your gate." "This became federal business the moment you pulled out scissors," Dr. Williams replied. "Forced grooming based on racial bias is a hate crime." The phrase hate crime rippled through the crowd like lightning. Passengers began murmuring, pointing, recording. The energy shifted from curious observation to moral outrage. Rebecca felt the change. 15 years of unchecked authority suddenly felt fragile. But she had committed to this course. Backing down now would signal weakness, invite future challenges. Final warning. Rebecca announced, her voice rising to address the entire gate. "Comply with grooming standards or forfeit your seat. I will not disrupt this flight for one passenger's vanity." She raised the scissors higher, making them visible to everyone watching. The terminal went quiet. Not airport quiet. Execution quiet. The kind of quiet that screams louder than words. Devon looked around the terminal. Dozens of faces stared back. Some sympathetic, some uncomfortable, some actively recording. He thought about his speech tomorrow, about students who would be listening, about the message he was supposed to deliver, about carrying history forward. How could he speak about dignity and pride if he let a stranger cut away his crown in an airport terminal? How could he honor his ancestors if he traded his identity for an airplane seat? But how could he miss the most important moment of his young life because of one woman's hatred? "Please," Devon said the word barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying across the silent gate. "Don't do this to me." The vulnerability in his voice hit the crowd like a physical blow. This wasn't a confrontation between equals. This was a teenager being attacked by an adult with institutional power. David facing Goliath, except David was 18 and alone and 200 miles from home. Rebecca heard the pleading and felt vindicated. This was how authority worked. Push hard enough, and even the most defiant passengers crumbled. "I'm sorry you're embarrassed," Rebecca said, not sounding sorry at all. "But policies exist for everyone's comfort and safety. Hold still." She stepped forward with the scissors. And Devon did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He sat down. Right there on the terminal floor, crossing his legs, like he was in meditation. Devon sat down and looked up at Rebecca with calm, steady eyes. "I won't stand while you assault me," he said quietly. "If you're going to cut my hair, you'll do it while I'm sitting on this floor in front of all these cameras, with all these witnesses watching." The crowd gasped. A teenager sitting on an airport floor, refusing to participate in his own humiliation, transforming from victim to protester in a single movement. Rebecca stared down at him, scissors still in hand, suddenly unsure. She had expected compliance or departure. She hadn't expected resistance that looked like this. "Get up," she commanded. "Get up right now." "No, ma'am," Devon replied. "If you want to cut my hair, you'll do it here with everyone watching, so there's no question about what really happened." Carlos Rivera zoomed in on Devon's face. calm, determined, unbroken. Then he panned to Rebecca standing over a seated teenager with scissors, looking like everything wrong with institutional power. Jennifer Walsh whispered to her phone, "This is incredible. This kid just turned a hate crime into a protest." Dr. Williams stepped closer. "Son, I want everyone to hear your name and your story." "Devon Mitchell," Devon replied, still sitting still looking up at Rebecca. "I'm 18 years old. I'm from Denver. I'm supposed to speak at the National Youth Leadership Summit tomorrow about carrying history forward." His voice carried across the terminal clear and strong. Passengers throughout the gate area could hear every word. "I grew my hair to honor my ancestors." Devon continued. "My great-great-grandfather wore his hair in locks when he escaped slavery. My grandmother taught me that my crown reflects my story. This woman wants to cut away 6 years of my identity because she doesn't think I belong in first class." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. "But I do belong," Devon said, his voice growing stronger. "I belong on that plane. I belong in that seat. I belong in tomorrow's summit. I belong in America. And my hair belongs with me." Rebecca stood frozen, scissors in hand, realizing that every second she remained standing over this seated teenager made her look more monstrous to the watching crowd. "Get up," she repeated, but her voice had lost its authority. "Ma'am," Devon said gently, "I'm not going to help you humiliate me. If you're going to do this, you'll do it alone in front of everyone, so history can see exactly who you are." The words hit like a judgment. History would see exactly who she was, a woman with scissors standing over a seated teenager, demanding to cut his hair because she didn't like the way he looked. Rebecca's hand began to tremble. Around them, the crowd had grown to nearly 50 people. Gate 42B had become the center of attention for half the concourse. Passengers from other flights were walking over to see what was happening. Maria Santos had called her supervisor. Jennifer Walsh was live streaming to Facebook. Carlos Rivera was broadcasting to Instagram. Dr. Williams had texted her contacts at the ACLU. And in the center of it all, Devon Mitchell sat on the floor, looking up at his attacker with steady eyes and unshakable dignity. "This is your last chance," Rebecca said, but even she could hear the desperation in her voice. "Stand up and let me fix your hair, or forfeit your ticket." Devon smiled, not mocking, not angry, a sad, knowing smile. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "my hair doesn't need fixing. Your heart does." The crowd erupted, not in cheers or boos, but in the kind of murmuring that happens when people witness something they'll remember forever. Rebecca looked around at the faces surrounding her, all watching, all judging, all recording. She raised the scissors, and Devon closed his eyes, whispering a prayer his grandmother had taught him. "Give me strength to carry my crown with dignity, even when others try to take it from me." Rebecca reached for his hair, and that's when his father's phone call reached the airline. Not customer service, not a supervisor, directly to the CEO. Because Jonathan Mitchell hadn't built a $3.2 billion company by working through channels. The scissors were 6 inches from Devon's hair when Rebecca's radio crackled to life. "Rebecca Stone to gate services immediately. Rebecca Stone to gate services immediately. Priority Alpha. Priority Alpha meant emergency. Drop everything. Respond now." Rebecca hesitated, scissors still raised. Devon, still sitting calmly on the floor. 50 witnesses, still recording every second. Her radio crackled again. "Rebecca Stone, respond immediately. CEO directive. CEO directive." Rebecca had never heard those words on the radio before. She looked down at Devon, then at the scissors in her hand, then at the crowd of witnesses surrounding them. Something was happening. Something bigger than grooming policy. Something that involved the highest levels of the airline. "Don't move," she told Devon, though he hadn't moved since sitting down. Rebecca keyed her radio. Stone responding. "What's the nature of the priority?" The response came immediately clear enough for the entire gate to hear. "Cease all passenger interaction immediately. Return to crew quarters. Federal authorities en route. Federal authorities." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Rebecca looked at Devon sitting peacefully on the floor, his hair still untouched, his dignity intact. And for the first time in 15 years, Rebecca Stone realized she might have chosen the wrong passenger to target. Devon's phone buzzed against his chest. "Dad." He looked at the caller ID, then up at Rebecca, then at the crowd of witnesses surrounding them. "Ma'am," he said gently, still sitting on the airport floor. "I think my father might want to talk to your boss." Jonathan Mitchell stood in the hallway outside TechCore Industries conference room, his phone pressed to his ear, listening to his mother's voice shake with a rage he hadn't heard since his own childhood encounters with institutional racism. "They're live streaming it, Jonathan," Nana Rose said, her words tumbling over each other. "That woman has scissors. She's standing over our baby with scissors, trying to cut away everything we taught him to value about himself." Jonathan closed his eyes, seeing his son as he had this morning, confident, proud, ready to address the nation's future leaders. Devon had practiced his speech 3 times yesterday evening, each run-through more powerful than the last. And now, some stranger was trying to cut away his crown. "Send me the video," Jonathan said, his voice deadly calm. "Everything. Every link. Every live stream. I need to see what we're dealing with." "Already sent," Nana Rose replied. "Jonathan, do something. That boy is sitting on that airport floor like he's making a stand, but he's just 18. He's just a baby facing down a grown woman with power and scissors." Jonathan opened his email, clicked the first link, and watched his son sit down on Denver International Airport terminal floor, transforming from victim to protester in one fluid movement. Pride and fury warred in his chest. Pride at Devon's courage, fury at the system that had put his son in this position. Jonathan scrolled to his contact list. 25 years of careful relationship building. The invisible network of people who made decisions affecting millions. He started with the nuclear option. Amanda Torres answered her personal line on the second ring. "Jonathan, what a surprise." "Amanda." Jonathan interrupted, his voice containing no warmth whatsoever. "I'm looking at live footage of your employee holding scissors to my son's head." Pause. "Let it sink in. You have 180 seconds to fire her before I dismantle your airline piece by piece." Jonathan's voice dropped to a whisper. 179. 178. "Jonathan, I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. 177. Your flight attendant Rebecca Stone, Gate 42B, Flight 847. She threatened to forcibly cut my son's dreadlocks because she decided they didn't meet grooming standards. There is no such policy. This is racial discrimination. This is assault. This is a federal hate crime happening in real time on social media." Amanda Torres sat in her executive office overlooking Denver International Airport, suddenly understanding that her Tuesday had just become the worst day of her career. "Let me call down to operations. 160. 159. Here's what's happening. Rebecca Stone gets fired immediately, arrested, prosecuted to the fullest extent of federal law. Your company issues public apology. You implement mandatory bias training. You establish passenger bill of rights protecting travelers from discrimination." Jonathan paused. "Or I spend the next decade making Skyward Airlines a cautionary tale about institutional racism. Jonathan, please, 90 seconds. I'm ending this call to make others. When I call back in exactly 3 minutes, you'll tell me Rebecca Stone has been fired and federal authorities are en route. Fail, and the next call you receive will be from your board, asking why your stock price is in free fall. Click. David, it's Jonathan. I need you to short every share of Skyward Airline stock you can access in the next 60 minutes. What's happening? David's voice was sharp, immediately professional. Civil rights disaster. Their employee just assaulted my son on video. Multiple live streams. Federal hate crime. Going viral as we speak. David Chen had known Jonathan for 8 years, had watched him build TechCore from startup to empire, had never seen him make a reckless financial decision. How confident are you? Confident enough to bet my reputation on it. David, after you short it, start spreading the word. Institutional investors need to know. Skyward is about to become radioactive, already moving. This goes public when it's already public. Check Twitter in 10 minutes. Crown violation hashtag. This isn't just stock manipulation, David. This is justice. Maria, I need emergency congressional hearings on airline discrimination. I'm sending video evidence of Skyward Airlines employee attempting to forcibly cut a black teenager's hair based on racial bias. Jonathan, that's assault. Federal hate crime, Maria. Clear-cut discrimination. On federal transportation property. I need congressional pressure, media attention, legislative response. Send me everything. If this is what you're describing, I'll call emergency committee session. This gets priority treatment. Pat, I need federal hate crime charges filed today. Skyward Airlines employee scissors. Black teenager. Racial discrimination. Video evidence from 5 angles. Jonathan, federal hate crime prosecution requires multiple witnesses, clear evidence of racial animus. Federal property, interstate commerce. I have all of it. Pat, this is my son. Judge Kim's voice softened. Send me everything. Federal charges, civil rights investigation, full DOJ review. This gets expedited processing. This happened on federal transportation property general. Military jurisdiction applies. DOD has authority over civil rights violations in federal transportation hubs. Jonathan, you're asking me to... I'm asking you to protect a black child from institutional violence. Same reason you wear that uniform. Understood. Military investigators will coordinate with FBI. This gets federal priority. Sophia, breaking news. Civil rights assault. Federal transportation property. Multiple video angles streaming live right now. I'm listening, Sophia said. News instincts engaged. Skyward Airlines flight attendant. Pulling scissors on black teenager, threatening to cut his dreadlocks because of grooming standards. The teenager is my son, 18 valedictorian national scholar speaking at Youth Leadership Summit tomorrow. Send me the links. How fast do you need this on air? It needs to lead tonight's broadcast. This isn't just my son. This is every black child who's been told their natural hair doesn't belong. This is institutional racism with scissors and a uniform. Make it national. Consider it done. Jonathan, I'm sorry this is happening to your family. Don't be sorry. Be loud. Make sure the world sees exactly what American corporate culture does to black children when it thinks no one's watching. Derek, nuclear social media mobilization. Racial attack on black teenager airline employee scissors. Dreadlocks, federal property. Hashtag, crown violation. Make it impossible to scroll without seeing this story. Derek Cole was black himself, had faced his own hair discrimination growing up in Atlanta. Already saw it trending, Derek said. Carlos Rivera's video is at 800,000 views and climbing. This is moving fast, Jonathan. I need it to move faster. Celebrities, athletes, politicians, activists. This needs to be the only story anyone talks about today. Brother, I can make this the only story anyone talks about this decade. Give me 30 minutes. Every black celebrity with a platform will repost this. Every athlete will comment. Every politician will make statements. Derek, this is about protecting our children from institutional violence. I know exactly what this is about. My son is 14, growing his locks for 3 years. This could be him in 4 years. We're going to light this up so bright airlines will never think about touching a black child's hair again. Jonathan made 12 calls in 18 minutes. By the time he called Amanda Torres back, Skyward Airlines stock had dropped 11%. Crown violation was trending in 3 countries. DOT investigators were boarding planes to Denver. Global News Network was preparing breaking coverage. Congressional hearings were being scheduled. Federal prosecutors were reviewing hate crime charges, Amanda Jonathan said when she answered Second Chance. What did you do about Rebecca Stone? She's been suspended pending investigation. Wrong answer. She's been fired. Immediately. Effective now. Federal authorities are already en route because I didn't wait for you to do the right thing. Jonathan could hear panic in Amanda Torres's voice. Jonathan, please. We can work this out, Amanda. In 18 minutes, I've triggered federal investigation, crashed your stock price, made your airline tonight's lead story, initiated congressional hearings, and activated military jurisdiction review. This isn't negotiation. This is accountability. He paused, looking out at San Francisco skyline. My son is sitting on an airport floor right now, protecting his dignity while your employee threatens him with scissors. Every second he sits there, every moment, his humiliation continues cost your airline another $1 million and another year of recovery time. What do you want? I want my son treated with respect he deserves. I want Rebecca Stone arrested. I want systemic change. I want to make sure no other black child ever faces what Devon is facing. Jonathan's voice grew quiet, more dangerous. But mostly, Amanda, I want you to understand that when you attack a black child's crown, you're not just hurting that child. You're declaring war on every ancestor who died to protect the right to exist authentically. And that war, you're going to lose. He hung up and immediately called his son. In Denver, Devon Mitchell felt his phone vibrate against his chest. Still sitting on the airport floor, surrounded by witnesses facing Rebecca Stone and her scissors, he looked at the caller ID. Dad. Devon Jonathan's voice came through clear and strong. Son, are you hurt? No, sir. Devon replied, his voice carrying across the terminal. I'm okay. I'm sitting on the floor at the gate. This woman wants to cut my hair with scissors, but I told her she'd have to do it in front of everyone, so they can see exactly what's happening. Pride and pain warred in Jonathan's voice. Devon, help is coming. Federal authorities, DOT investigators, legal representation. But more than that, I want you to know that what you're doing right now, protecting your dignity, refusing to participate in your own humiliation, that's the bravest thing I've ever seen. Rebecca Stone's radio crackled. Stone, report to crew quarters immediately. CEO orders. Devon looked up at her from his position on the floor. Ma'am, he said gently, I think my dad might want to talk to your boss. Around them, the internet was beginning to burn. 2:15 p.m. Mountain Time. The digital fuse ignites. Carlos Rivera's Instagram Live had started with 50,000 followers watching his travel documentary content. But social media algorithms, designed to detect and amplify emotional intensity, recognized something explosive happening at Gate 42B. 2:17 p.m. First platform. Cascade Instagram algorithm pushed the video into feeds across the platform. Views, 100,000, and climbing exponentially. Comments flooding in faster than the system could process. 2:19 p.m. Cross-platform contamination. Maria Santos's sister, a high school student in Los Angeles, screen-recorded Carlos's live stream and posted to TikTok. This is happening right now at Denver Airport. White flight attendant trying to cut black teen's locks with scissors. This is 2024. The TikTok algorithm detected rapid engagement. 1,000 views in first minute, 10,000 in 5 minutes, 100,000 in 10 minutes, 500,000 in 15 minutes, 2:22 p.m. Celebrity. Amplification begins. The video reached Sarah Chen, civil rights attorney in Chicago, who forwarded to ACLU, NAACP, Legal Defense Fund, Southern Poverty Law Center. It reached Marcus Williams, sports agent in Atlanta, who sent to every professional athlete in his roster. It reached Dr. Angela Davis, sociology professor at Howard University, who shared with her 500,000 Twitter followers with historical context about hair discrimination. 2:25 p.m. The Derek Cole Network activates Derek's single message to 500 premium influencers. Priority amplification. Civil rights emergency. Crown violation. Hashtag. Make this unavoidable. 2:27 p.m. Jasmine Rodriguez. 2.3 m. Instagram followers posted Carlos's video to her story. This is why representation matters. This beautiful young king protecting his crown while adults try to steal it. Crown violation. Hashtag. 2:29 p.m. Marcus Thompson. 1.8 m. TikTok followers duetted the video. Y'all, this is somebody's son. Look how calm he is. Look how dignified. They're trying to cut his hair because they don't think he belongs in first class. This is America in 2024. 2:31 p.m. Keisha Washington. 3.2 m. Twitter followers quoted the video. The audacity of this white woman with scissors, thinking she gets to decide what parts of his black identity are acceptable for an airplane. The audacity. Crown violation. Hashtag. 2:35 p.m. The exponential explosion. Each share multiplied geometrically. Instagram stories leading to TikTok duets, leading to Twitter threads, leading to Facebook posts, leading to Reddit discussions. Crown violation, trending in Denver. Crown violation trending nationally. Crown violation trending internationally. 2:40 p.m. A-list. Celebrity cascade. The video reached LeBron James, who posted to his 52 million Instagram followers. This young king's courage is everything. Protecting his crown while they try to steal it. We see you, Devon Mitchell. We got you. Crown violation. Hashtag Beyoncé's team shared across all platforms. Politicians began crafting civil rights statements. Celebrities who had faced hair discrimination recognized the pain and power in Devon's resistance. 2:45 p.m. The human connection. But more importantly, it reached ordinary people. Black parents who saw their own children in Devon's face. White allies who recognized discrimination when they witnessed it. Teenagers who understood the courage required to stand up to adult authority. People of all backgrounds who recognized dignity when they saw it. Comments flooded faster than platforms could process. This young man has more grace under pressure than most adults. Protect him at all costs. I'm crying, watching this. The way he turned his humiliation into a protest. The strength. Why is a flight attendant walking around with scissors trying to cut a teenager's hair? This is insane. Look at his posture. Look at his voice. This is what strength looks like. I would die for this kid's composure. They're trying to break him, and he's just sitting there like a king. This is assault. Why is no one arresting her? 2:47 p.m. Financial markets react. Wall Street's sentiment analysis algorithms detected the viral negative content associated with Skyward Airlines. 2:48 p.m. First institutional sell-off. Fortress Capital begins dumping 15 million shares. Stock price $127.43 to $125.12. 2:52 p.m. Algorithm trading kicks in. High-frequency trading systems detect unusual volume. Stock price $125.12 to $122.84. Trading volume 847% increase. 2:56 p.m. Trading halt. Triggered. 20% single-day drop limit reached. Stock price $122.84 to $118.57. Market cap loss $400 million. 3:00 p.m. Panic selling resumes. Trading halt. Lifted panic continues. Stock price $118.57 to $114.23. Market cap loss $650 million. Portfolio managers called analysts. Analysts called research teams. Research teams discovered crown violation. Hashtag 3:15 p.m. Corporate headquarters. Chaos inside Skyward Airlines. Corporate headquarters at Denver International Airport. Amanda Torres sat in emergency session with her executive team, watching their airline become the most hated brand in America in real time. Social media metrics. She asked her digital director. 7 million views across all platforms and climbing exponentially. The hashtag is trending in 12 countries. Global News Network is running breaking coverage. CNN has picked it up. This will be lead story on every evening news broadcast. Stock damage down 23% and falling. We've lost $800 million in market cap in 90 minutes. Trading volume at historic highs as institutional investors dump positions. Legal exposure. The general counsel looked pale. Catastrophic. Federal hate crime charges possible. Civil rights violations. Assault on a minor. We're looking at millions in damages. Federal investigations. DOT sanctions. This could trigger congressional hearings. 3:20 p.m. The global reach. Crown violation had transcended American social media. UK Twitter. Crown protection needed here too. British black youth face same discrimination. South Africa. Instagram. Devon's courage inspires our own crown protection movement. Brazil. TikTok. Afro-Brazilian students share Devon's story in university discrimination protests. France. Facebook. French Airlines reviewing policies after Devon Mitchell incident. The moment had become a global symbol of dignity, defended authenticity, protected institutional power, challenged. 3:25 p.m. Corporate sponsors flee. Luxury brands. Proud to be associated with Skyward's first-class experience, began pulling partnerships. 3:27 p.m. Ritz-Carlton terminates. 5-year co-marketing deal. 3:31 p.m. American Express suspends co-branded loyalty program. 3:34 p.m. Mercedes-Benz ends corporate travel partnership. 3:38 p.m. Rolex pulls airport lounge sponsorship. Travel blogs labeled Skyward, the face of corporate racism. 3:30 p.m. The whistleblower leak. A bombshell email leaked to national media revealed Rebecca Stone had 3 prior complaints filed against her, each involving black passengers, each quietly dismissed by HR. The story exploded across platforms. Exclusive Skyward Attendant. had history of racial discrimination. 3:45 p.m. Federal Response Agent Patricia Morrison, FBI Civil Rights Division, arrived at Denver International with DOT investigators and airport security briefed during the drive by watching viral videos on her tablet. This case would define federal hate crime prosecution for a generation. 3:47 p.m. The arrest. As federal agents approached Gate 42B, Carlos Rivera's live stream captured the moment. Y'all federal agents just arrived. This is really happening. Devon protected his crown, and now the whole system is protecting Devon. The arrest would be watched by millions in real time. Rebecca Stone, who had woken up that morning as a flight attendant, would go to sleep as a federal defendant in a civil rights case destined to be studied for generations. The crown she had tried to steal from Devon Mitchell had become the crown that brought down an empire. Final social media stats at 4:00 p.m. Total views across platforms. 12.3 million countries trending. 23 celebrity reposts. 147 news outlets covering 89 stock price drop. 27%. Market cap loss. $1.2 billion. Federal agencies involved. 4. Congressional inquiries. 6. Legal firms calling Devon's family. 23. Devon. Mitchell's quiet resistance had become the loudest voice for civil rights in a generation. The world was watching. The world would remember. The world had changed. 3:47 p.m. Mountain Time. Federal authority arrives. Agent Patricia Morrison approached Gate 42B with the weight of federal law enforcement behind her. The FBI Civil Rights Division had been briefing on this case during her 40-minute drive from the Denver field office, watching viral videos on her tablet, understanding immediately that this would define hate crime prosecution for a generation. The crowd of nearly 100 witnesses parted as she approached Devon, who remained seated on the floor with the quiet dignity that had already inspired millions. Devon Mitchell. Agent Morrison's voice carried across the silent terminal. "Yes, ma'am," Devon replied, rising gracefully for the first time since the ordeal began. The collective exhale from the crowd was audible. They had been holding their breath to protect him. "I'm Agent Morrison, FBI Civil Rights Division. Are you injured?" Devon touched his hair still intact, still crowned with 6 years of careful growth and ancestral pride. "No, ma'am." She didn't cut it, but she tried. She threatened to. In front of all these people. Agent Morrison turned to Rebecca Stone, who stood frozen near the gate podium, scissors still visible in her trembling hand, her face pale with the dawning realization that federal law enforcement had arrived specifically for her. The federal arrest, 3:52 p.m. "Ma'am, put down the scissors and come with us. I was enforcing airline policy." Rebecca said, her voice small and defensive. "I was doing my job." "Ma'am, there is no airline policy requiring passengers to cut their hair." Agent Morrison replied, her voice carrying across the terminal for all cameras to capture. "We've reviewed Skyward Airlines' official policies. What you attempted constitutes assault civil rights violation and federal hate crime charges." Dr. Patricia Williams stepped forward with her detailed documentation. Agent Morrison. "I witnessed the entire confrontation. I have comprehensive notes about the discriminatory language used, the threats made, the specifically racial nature of the targeting." Carlos Rivera, still broadcasting live to Instagram, captured the arrest moment. "Rebecca Stone, you're under arrest for assault on a minor, civil rights violations, and hate crime charges on federal transportation property," Agent Morrison announced clearly. Click. The handcuffs closed around Rebecca's wrists with the finality of justice served. Her 15-year career with Skyward Airlines officially ended. More than that, She became the face of institutional racism in corporate America, the woman who tried to cut a teenager's crown because she thought her position gave her that right. As Rebecca was led away, Carlos Rivera's live stream captured her final moments. "Y'all, they just arrested the flight attendant. Federal charges. This is really happening." Corporate headquarters, meltdown, 4:15 p.m. Inside Skyward Airlines. Corporate headquarters, the emergency board meeting, had devolved into full crisis management. Amanda Torres faced panicked executives, furious board members, and grim-faced lawyers. Wall-mounted televisions showed their airline-dominating news coverage across every major network. Current stock status. Amanda asked, dreading the answer. Down 31% since market open. We've lost $1.4 billion in market cap. Trading volume at historic highs as every institutional investor dumps positions. Social media sentiment analysis. Completely negative. 97% of mentions calling for boycotts. Corporate partnerships being terminated in real time. Brand reputation score has dropped to lowest level our analysts have ever recorded. The General Counsel delivered the devastating news. DOT has launched full investigation into our training procedures, hiring practices, complaint handling systems. They're demanding 10 years of employment records, focusing specifically on discrimination complaints. Early indicators suggest federal sanctions, mandatory oversight, millions in fines. Amanda's phone rang continuously. Congressional oversight committees. Media requests. Board members demanding her resignation. Legal liability assessment. Catastrophic. The Mitchell family will sue for millions. But beyond that, we're facing potential class action from every passenger who's experienced discrimination. The video evidence is so clear, so public, we have no defense against civil rights claims. The CEO's reckoning call, 4:25 p.m. Amanda's direct line rang. Jonathan Mitchell. The room fell silent as she answered, knowing her entire executive team was listening. Mr. Mitchell. Ms. Torres. Jonathan's voice was calm, controlled, utterly without mercy. Your employee has been arrested. Federal charges filed. Stock price collapsed. Brand destroyed. My son, who was supposed to be addressing the nation's future leaders, spent his day sitting on an airport floor, protecting his dignity from your institutional racism. Amanda's hands shook. Mr. Mitchell, we want to make this right. You can't make this right. What happened to my son was attempted cultural violence, institutional assault, corporate-enabled hate. There is no making that right. Pause. Let the weight settle. But there is ensuring it never happens again. Here's what will happen. Immediate comprehensive policy changes, protecting passengers from appearance-based discrimination. Passenger Bill of Rights, specifically protecting cultural and religious expression. Independent Oversight Board with civil rights representation. Substantial compensation to Devon, not as settlement, but as acknowledgement of harm. Amanda listened, understanding she had no negotiating power. And Ms. Torres, you will personally apologize to my son. On camera, in front of the same witnesses who watched him be humiliated. You will acknowledge what happened was wrong, violated his civil rights, and that your airline failed in its basic responsibility to treat passengers with dignity. Click. Rebecca Stone's downfall. 5:30 p.m. Rebecca Stone sat in a federal holding cell, her airline uniform replaced with orange jail clothes, her scissors confiscated as evidence of assault with a deadly weapon. The booking process had been surreal. Fingerprints, mugshot, federal civil rights violation charges read aloud by a stone-faced prosecutor who had watched the viral videos and understood the historical significance. Rebecca Stone, you are charged with assault on a minor with a deadly weapon. federal civil rights violations based on racial discrimination, hate crime on federal transportation property, attempted forced grooming based on racial bias. Her mugshot would be on every news channel by nightfall, not as an employee, as the woman who tried to steal a teenager's crown. The federal prosecutor continued, "Given the public nature of this crime, the video evidence and flight risk considerations, bail is denied. You're remanded to federal custody pending trial." Rebecca's public defender. A exhausted-looking woman with too many cases leaned over, "Ma'am, they have you on video threatening a minor with scissors while making racially discriminatory statements." Multiple witnesses. Federal jurisdiction. This is career-ending and prison time, serious. The whistleblower revelation. 6:00 p.m. The bombshell that destroyed any remaining sympathy for Rebecca came from inside Skyward Airlines itself. Jennifer Walsh's live stream had been seen by Marcus Thompson, a former Skyward flight attendant, who had quit 2 years earlier after filing complaints about Rebecca Stone's treatment of black passengers. Marcus contacted every major news outlet with internal documents. Email chain from 2022, from Marcus Thompson to HR complaints. Subject: Rebecca Stone. Passenger discrimination. Rebecca Stone consistently singles out black passengers for random additional screening questions, the validity of their tickets, and makes comments about maintaining cabin standards that directly correlate with passenger race. I have witnessed this behavior on 12 flights. HR response: "Thank you for your feedback. Ms. Stone's performance reviews indicate excellent passenger relations. No further action required." 3 similar complaints, all buried, all ignored. Marcus told CNN Rebecca Stone's racism wasn't a secret. It was company policy. They protected her, promoted her, enabled her. Devon Mitchell's airport stand just made visible what we already knew. Skyward Airlines systematically discriminated against black passengers. Congressional response. 7:00 p.m. Senator Maria Hernandez called an emergency press conference. What happened to Devon Mitchell today represents a systematic failure of corporate accountability in American transportation. I am announcing immediate congressional hearings on discrimination in airline travel, with specific focus on appearance-based bias and cultural discrimination. She held up printed screenshots of Devon sitting on the airport floor. This young man's courage exposed institutional racism that has operated in the shadows for decades. Congress will ensure his courage leads to lasting change. Department of Justice statement. 8:00 p.m. Attorney General released official statement. The Department of Justice will prosecute Rebecca Stone to the fullest extent of federal law. Additionally, we are launching a comprehensive investigation into Skyward Airlines policies, training procedures, and complaint handling systems. Civil rights violations in transportation will not be tolerated. The evening news explosion. 9:00 p.m. Every major network led with Devon's story. CNN teenagers airport stand. Sparks national conversation on discrimination. ABC. Crown protection. How one teen's courage changed America. NBC federal charges. Filed in airline hair discrimination. Case. CBS. Skyward Airlines. Stock crashes. After viral discrimination. Video. But the most powerful coverage came from Sophia Martinez at Global News Network, who had received Jonathan Mitchell's exclusive cooperation. Good evening. We begin tonight with a story about dignity, courage, and the power of refusing to be diminished. 18-year-old Devon Mitchell was supposed to fly to Washington, D.C. today to address the nation's future leaders. Instead, he ended up teaching the nation a lesson about authentic resistance. The segment ran Devon's full airport footage, His father's business network response, the federal arrest, the stock market collapse, and the emerging congressional investigation. This isn't just about one teenager's hair, Sophia concluded. This is about a generation of young people who refuse to trade their identity for institutional acceptance. And tonight, that refusal has changed America. As Tuesday became Wednesday, Rebecca Stone slept in a federal jail cell, facing decades in prison. Devon Mitchell slept in his own bed, his crown intact, his dignity protected his courage, having inspired a movement. The scissors intended to diminish had instead elevated. The crown she tried to steal had become the crown that crowned a generation. 2 weeks later, Kennedy Center, Washington, D.C. Devon Mitchell walked onto the Kennedy Center stage to thunderous applause that lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds, timed by reporters who understood they were witnessing a generational moment. The Youth Leadership Summit had been transformed by his story. What was meant to be a standard conference had become a pivotal civil rights moment. The auditorium, designed to seat 200-300, was packed beyond capacity, with additional viewing areas throughout the building. C-SPAN, CNN, and streaming platforms broadcast live to an estimated global audience of 15 million. Devon approached the podium, wearing the same charcoal gray suit from the airport, his dreadlocks now grown longer, tied back with a leather cord gifted by a Lakota elder who had traveled to D.C. specifically to honor his courage. "My name is Devon Mitchell." He began, his voice carrying the same quiet strength that had resonated in that airport terminal. 2 weeks ago, I was supposed to be here talking about carrying history forward. Instead, I ended up making history by refusing to let someone cut it away. The audience erupted in applause and cheers. "I want to talk about crowns," Devon continued. "Not the kind made of gold or jewels, but the kind we grow from our own bodies, inherit from our ancestors. The kind that represent our authentic selves in a world that demands we change to fit in." His original speech about leadership had been transformed into something more powerful, a manifesto on identity, dignity, and authentic resistance. When I sat down on that airport floor, I wasn't trying to start a movement. I was trying to protect something sacred. My hair isn't just hair. It's 6 years of conversations with my grandmother about resilience. It's ancestors who maintained identity even when the world tried to erase it. It's daily ritual of caring for something that grows from my body, connecting me to culture, family, authentic self. Civil rights leaders, politicians, educators, and hundreds of young people hung on every word. But here's what I learned in that terminal. When one person stands up to protect their dignity, it gives everyone permission to protect theirs. When one person refuses to be diminished, it reminds the world that diminishment is unacceptable. Devon's voice grew stronger. "The woman who tried to cut my hair thought she had power over me. She thought her uniform, her authority, her position gave her the right to decide what parts of my identity were acceptable. But real power isn't the ability to diminish others. Real power is the ability to stand in your truth, even when the whole world is watching, even when someone with scissors tells you that your truth doesn't belong." The crowd was absorbed, silent. Since that day, I've received thousands of messages from young people told their hair was distracting their clothes, inappropriate, their accents, unprofessional, their existence somehow wrong for spaces they wanted to occupy. I want to tell them what my grandmother told me. Your crown reflects your story. Never let anyone convince you to cut your story short. Devon paused, looking at the sea of faces, seeing himself reflected in countless young people who had faced institutional rejection. But this isn't just about hair. This is about the right to exist authentically in America. The right to take up space without apologizing for the space you occupy. The right to pursue dreams without trading identity for acceptance. The speech was live streaming across every platform shared by celebrities, politicians, ordinary people who recognized truth. 3 days after the airport incident, Congress introduced the Crown Protection Act, federal legislation protecting people from discrimination based on natural hair, cultural expression, authentic appearance. It passed both houses with bipartisan support, because sometimes when the whole country witnesses injustice, the whole country demands justice. The crowd erupted, understanding they were witnessing not just a speech, but a victory lap for a movement that started with one teenager's refusal to be diminished. The Crown Protection Act, legislative victory. The legislation had moved through Congress with unprecedented speed. Day 3. Bill introduced by Senator Maria Hernandez. Day 7. House committee hearings, featuring Devon's testimony. Day 12 Senate vote. 89-11 passage. Day 15. House vote. 367-68 passage. Day 18. Presidential signing ceremony. The act created comprehensive federal protections. Natural hairstyles, legally protected in schools, workplaces, transportation, $50,000 minimum, damages for violations, civil rights violation, classification for forced grooming, mandatory cultural sensitivity training, whistleblower protection for reporting discrimination. Devon had been present at the signing, given the pen used to sign the legislation. Laws are just words on paper, unless we have courage to enforce them through daily choices, Devon continued in his Kennedy Center speech. Unless we speak up when we see discrimination, unless we stand up for each other's right to exist authentically. Crown Rise Foundation Impact. In 2 weeks, Devon's foundation had achieved remarkable scale, $4.7 million raised from 50,000 plus donors. Legal aid centers in 8 cities. 12 full-time staff members, 147 discrimination cases, supported 500 plus teachers, trained on cultural sensitivity. We've helped young people fight hair discrimination in schools. We've supported families pursuing legal action against employers. We've trained teachers on inclusive policies. But most importantly, we've reminded young people they don't have to choose between success and authenticity. The Q&A moment that changed everything. During the post-speech Q&A, a 12-year-old black girl from Baltimore raised her hand. Devon, I'm Zara. I was the girl who asked you about my school at the beginning. Remember Devon's face lit with recognition. This was the girl who had been sent home for her locks, who had asked whether she should cut them to avoid missing classes. Zara, look at you. Look at your beautiful crown. I kept growing them, Zara said proudly, just like you told me to. Crown Rise Foundation lawyers came to my school. Now I've never missed another day for my hair. I'm in 8th grade, made honor roll every semester. Jonathan Mitchell watched his son interact with Zara, seeing the completion of a circle that began with one teenager's courage and expanded to protect millions. How's school now? Amazing teachers compliment my hair now. My principal invited me to speak at school board about cultural pride. And guess what? I'm going to Howard University when I graduate. Just like you, I want to study law so I can protect other kids' crowns. The crowd erupted, but Devon wasn't finished. Zara, you keep growing those locks. You keep being exactly who you are. And remember that somewhere in Colorado, there's an 18-year-old who sat on an airport floor for you, who faced down a woman with scissors for you, who helped pass federal laws for you. Your crown is protected now. Wear it proudly. That exchange, captured and shared millions of times, became the defining moment of the speech, a conversation between 2 generations of black youth, one who had fought for protection and one who would benefit from that fight. Systemic industry transformation. Following Skyward's spectacular bankruptcy 4 months after Devon's incident, The airline industry had rushed to implement comprehensive bias training and cultural protection policies. Major airlines adopted Crown Protection corporate standards: Microsoft, Google, Apple, Amazon. Explicit protection for cultural expression. United Delta. American mandatory bias training every 6 months. Southwest JetBlue. Alaska. Independent oversight boards for discrimination complaints. The business case for authenticity is now undeniable. Explained. Dr. Marcus Johnson, diversity consultant who had worked with over 200 companies. Post Devon. Organizations embracing authentic self-expression. See higher employee satisfaction, better retention, increased innovation, stronger community connections. Cultural transformation in communities. The ripple effects extended into barbershops, beauty salons, family homes across America. In Detroit, Master Barber James Crawford had installed a sign, "Your crown is sacred here." Since Devon's story, I've had parents bringing children specifically to learn about LO Care protective styles, hair as cultural connection. Kids who used to be ashamed of their texture now ask how to grow hair like Devon's. Global impact. Devon's airport moment had become international London Crown protection. UK demanding similar legislative protections. South Africa. Students citing Devon's courage. Challenging university policies. Brazil. Afro-Brazilian activists using Crown Rise resources against workplace discrimination. France Airlines, reviewing policies after Devon Mitchell incident. His story had become a global symbol of dignity, defended authenticity, protected institutional power, challenged. Rebecca Stone's fate. Rebecca Stone had been sentenced to 18 months federal prison, $75,000 in damages to Devon, lifetime ban from transportation industry. Her case became required reading in law schools, a cautionary tale about institutional racism and individual accountability. Her mugshot remained iconic, not celebrated, but remembered as the face of everything wrong with giving unchecked authority to people who wielded bias as policy. The speech conclusion. "What happened to me at that airport was attempted cultural violence," Devon said, reaching his crescendo. "The belief that my natural state was unacceptable, that my connection to ancestors was unprofessional, that my identity was negotiable if someone with power decided it was." His voice grew quiet, but intense. But here's what Rebecca Stone didn't understand. You can't cut away someone's connection to their ancestors. You can't legislate away cultural pride. You can't policy away the power that comes from knowing exactly who you are and refusing to apologize for it. The audience was completely absorbed. The Crown Protection Act is now federal law. Hair discrimination is now a civil rights violation. Schools and employers and airlines can no longer hide behind grooming policies that target black bodies and cultural expression. Devon smiled, looking like the 18-year-old he was, rather than the movement leader he had become. But the most important protection doesn't come from Congress or courts or corporate policies. It comes from each of us deciding that dignity is non-negotiable, that authenticity is not a privilege to be earned, but a right to be protected, that our crowns, whatever they look like, are too sacred to be touched by other people's limitations. As Devon concluded, the standing ovation lasted over 6 minutes. Young people were crying, inspired, energized. Adults were taking notes, making plans, committing to action. Social media exploded. You can't cut away someone's connection to their ancestors. 3 million views first hour. Real power is the ability to stand in your truth. Shared by LeBron. Oprah AOC. Your crown reflects your story. Rallying cry for authentic self-expression. Devon had taught America that dignity defended becomes dignity multiplied, that authenticity protected becomes authenticity empowered, that sometimes sitting down in the face of injustice is the most powerful way to stand up for what's right. 6 months later, National Infrastructure of Protection. The Crown Rise Foundation operated from gleaming headquarters in Atlanta's Civil Rights District, transforming from Devon's personal response to injustice into national infrastructure protecting cultural authenticity. What had begun as one teenager's refusal to be diminished had become systematic transformation of how institutions treated Black bodies and identity. Dr. Keisha Williams, executive director and former ACLU attorney, stood before wall-mounted monitors displaying real-time data nationwide. Hair discrimination complaints down 73% in schools. Crown Protection Act, legal victories, 94%. Success rate, lives transformed. Immeasurable Devon's airport moment created what we call the dignity effect. Dr. Williams explained to visiting journalist Soledad O'Brien, when one person refuses diminishment publicly, it gives millions permission to refuse diminishment privately. Black students now stand up to dress codes. Black employees challenge workplace grooming policies. Black families demand respect in historically marginalizing spaces. Educational revolution. The Foundation's initiatives reached school districts in 47 states, training teachers and administrators on cultural sensitivity, implicit bias, and the difference between maintaining standards and enforcing assimilation. In Memphis, Principal Sarah Chen implemented Crown Rise curriculum that transformed her school's climate. Before training, we had teachers writing up Black students for distracting hairstyles without understanding the cultural violence they were inflicting. Now we have educators who see natural hair as beautiful cultural expression, as valuable authenticity, as something to celebrate rather than correct. Suspension rates for appearance violations, 0. Academic achievement among students of color, up 23%. College enrollment, historic highs. 17-year-old Marcus Thompson, Roosevelt, high senior, captured the transformation. Before I stressed every morning about whether my hair was too wild for school. Now, I spend that time thinking about class's future dreams. Devon gave us permission to be ourselves while learning to become who we want to be. Corporate culture revolution. Following Skyward's collapse, major corporations had rushed to implement comprehensive bias training and cultural protection policies. Microsoft, Google, Apple, Amazon adopted explicit protection for employees' natural hairstyles, cultural dress, authentic self-expression. More than protecting against discrimination, these policies actively celebrated cultural diversity as competitive advantage. Organizations embracing authentic self-expression see higher employee satisfaction, better retention rates, increased innovation, stronger community connections, explained Dr. Marcus Johnson, diversity consultant who had worked with 200-plus companies post-Devon. Devon's airport stand didn't just protect civil rights, it revolutionized corporate culture. Barbershop and beauty renaissance. In Detroit, master barber James Crawford installed a sign reading, "Your crown is sacred here." Since Devon's story went viral, parents bring children specifically to learn about LO Care protective styles, hair as cultural connection. Kids who used to be ashamed of their texture now ask how to grow hair like Devon's. The movement had created cultural celebration of natural hair, protective styles, authentic Black beauty, previously marginalized by Eurocentric standards. Legal landscape transformation. The Crown Protection Act enabled Department of Justice to pursue systematic investigations of institutions with appearance-based discrimination patterns. 12 school districts. Federal oversight. 7 major corporations. Substantial settlements. 3 State university systems. Policy revision after DOJ intervention. Beyond enforcement, the law created cultural change. Children growing up in a world where natural hair was federally protected, cultural expression legally valued, authenticity institutionally respected. Airline industry overhaul. The airline industry, devastated by Skyward's collapse and fearful of similar fates, became most aggressive in implementing Crown protection policies, flight attendant training, mandatory cultural sensitivity, education, passenger bills of rights, explicit appearance-based expression, protection, independent oversight boards, monitoring discrimination complaints. Devon's airport stand cost our industry billions, short-term admitted. Thomas Rodriguez, Continental Airways CEO. But it forced us to become better. Passengers feel more respected, employees are better trained. Industry reputation rebuilt on dignity rather than discrimination. Social media. Evolution. Crown protection. Hashtag had evolved from emergency hashtag to permanent movement, generating millions of posts, celebrating authentic self-expression, cultural pride, institutional accountability. Young people shared photos of natural hair, cultural dress, authentic selves with captions like, "Devon gave us permission to be beautiful," protected by courage crowned in pride. Parents documented children's confident self-expression, refusal to code switch, or culturally assimilate, authentic navigation of spaces historically demanding conformity. Global movement expansion. Devon's impact transcended American borders. London, Crown protection. UK, demanding similar legislative protections. South Africa, students citing Devon's courage, challenging university grooming policies. Brazil, Afro-Brazilian activists using Crown Rise Foundation resources to combat workplace discrimination. Canada, Federal Crown Protection Act, introduced in Parliament Australia. Aboriginal youth referencing. Devon's courage in cultural expression campaigns. The movement had transcended hair discrimination to become broader celebration of authentic identity in all forms. Academic and research impact. Dr. Angela Davis, renowned civil rights activist, had written extensively about Devon's impact on generational consciousness. This young man's airport sit-in represents a new paradigm of resistance, not just fighting against oppression, but actively protecting authenticity. Not demanding inclusion, but insisting on authentic inclusion that celebrates, rather than merely tolerates difference. Law schools now taught the Mitchell Standard, the legal precedent that authentic cultural expression could not be regulated by institutional bias disguised as policy. Psychology departments studied Crown psychology, the mental health benefits of cultural authenticity, protection for marginalized youth. Business schools analyzed the Devon effect, how authentic inclusion policies improved corporate performance and community relations. Community healing and empowerment. Beyond policy and legal victories. Devon's story had created space for collective healing. Black families shared stories of their own hair discrimination experiences. Parents who had relaxed children's hair to protect them, students who had been suspended for protective styles, employees who had been passed over for promotions because their natural hair was deemed unprofessional. The Crown Rise Foundation's mental health initiatives provided counseling support groups and healing circles for individuals processing decades of appearance-based trauma. Devon's courage didn't just protect future crowns, reflected Dr. Melissa Johnson, trauma specialist working with the foundation. It gave permission for people to grieve the times their own crowns had been attacked, diminished, or hidden. Healing happened when authenticity became not just protected, but celebrated. Youth leadership development. The Foundation's youth programs had identified and mentored hundreds of young activists across the country. These Crown protectors were leading policy changes in their schools, organizing community education events, and creating peer support networks for students facing discrimination. 15-year-old Aisha Williams from Phoenix had successfully challenged her school's dress code that banned distracting hairstyles. Devon showed us that we don't have to accept discrimination just because adults call it policy. We have power too. 17-year-old Miguel Santos from Chicago had organized Crown Pride Week at his high school, celebrating cultural diversity and educating peers about the history of appearance-based discrimination. Devon proved that standing up for yourself can create protection for everyone who comes after you. Institutional memory and ongoing vigilance. While celebrating victories, Crown Rise Foundation maintained focus on ongoing challenges. Discrimination had become more subtle. Coded language, unconscious bias, institutional practices that appeared neutral but disproportionately affected people of color. The Foundation's monitoring systems tracked discrimination patterns, identified emerging challenges, and provided rapid response legal support for individuals facing contemporary forms of appearance-based bias. The work isn't finished, Dr. Williams emphasized. Devon's airport moment created legal protection and cultural change, but vigilance is eternal. Each generation must defend the crowns of the next. Devon's personal evolution. As Devon prepared to complete his freshman year at Howard University, he reflected on the transformation his single moment of courage had created while maintaining focus on his education and personal growth. "I sometimes think about that airport terminal," he said during a campus interview, "about sitting on that floor protecting my crown while the whole world watched. I was just trying to get to my speech about carrying history forward. I didn't know I was actually going to make history." His Howard dorm room walls were covered with letters from young people whose lives had been changed by the Crown Protection Act, by his foundation's work, by his example of dignity defended. "The most important thing I learned is that authenticity is contagious. When one person stands up for their right to exist authentically, it gives everyone permission to do the same. My crown was threatened, but protecting it meant protecting all of our crowns." Devon maintained his daily hair care ritual, 30 minutes each morning of oiling sectioning and twisting his locks, now grown even longer and more beautiful. But the meditation had evolved from personal practice to global responsibility. Each morning as he cared for his crown, he thought about Zara in Baltimore attending school without fear, about Marcus in Phoenix growing his locks proudly, about thousands of young people worldwide who could exist authentically because one teenager had refused to let a stranger with scissors diminish his dignity. The transformation was complete, but ongoing. Devon Mitchell had sat down in an airport terminal to protect his individual dignity. In doing so, he had stood up for an entire generation's right to exist authentically in America. Rebecca Stone had tried to cut away 6 years of a teenager's cultural identity. Instead, she had unleashed a movement that would protect millions of crowns for generations to come. The scissors intended to diminish had instead elevated an entire culture of authentic self-expression, turning one moment of attempted humiliation into a lifetime of protected dignity for countless others. 1 year later, Denver International Airport. Devon Mitchell stood in the same terminal at Denver International Airport, but everything had changed. Gate 42B, where he had sat on the floor defending his crown while the world watched, now featured a permanent installation, a bronze plaque reading, "Crown Protection Site, where dignity defended became dignity multiplied." Devon Mitchell, Civil Rights Pioneer, 2024. Devon wasn't alone this time. His parents, Jonathan and Lisa Mitchell, stood beside him along with Nana Rose, whose teachings about crowns and ancestry had given him strength to face institutional hatred with quiet dignity. They were returning from Howard University's commencement ceremony, where Devon had completed his freshman year with a 3.9 GPA, while simultaneously running a National Civil Rights Foundation and speaking at conferences worldwide. "You know," Nana Rose said, running weathered fingers through Devon's locks, now grown past his shoulders, and more beautiful than ever. "When I first taught you about crowns, I never imagined the whole world would learn the lesson too." The transformation was visible throughout the airport. Crown Protection Act compliance notices were posted at every gate. Skyward Airlines had been replaced by Unity Airways, a new carrier founded explicitly on principles of inclusion and cultural celebration. Flight attendants wore pins reading "All crowns welcome here." But the deeper transformation was in the faces of travelers themselves. Black families moved through the airport with different energy, confident, unguarded, authentic. Children wore natural hair proudly. Teenagers carried themselves with knowledge that their identity was federally protected. Parents didn't nervously check their children's appearance before approaching gate agents. The full circle moment. A young black girl, maybe 8 years old, approached Devon near the memorial plaque. Her hair was twisted into beautiful locks, reaching her shoulders, adorned with colorful beads catching terminal lighting. "Are you Devon Mitchell?" she asked, her voice bright with recognition. "I am Devon," replied, kneeling to meet her at eye level. "My name is Zara," she said. "I was the girl who asked you about my school at the Kennedy Center." Remember, Devon's face lit with recognition. This was the 12-year-old from Baltimore, who had been sent home for her locks, who had asked whether she should cut them to avoid missing classes. "Zara, look at you. Look at your beautiful crown. I kept growing them," Zara said proudly. "Just like you told me to." Crown Rise Foundation lawyers came to my school. Now I've never missed another day for my hair. I'm in 8th grade now. Made honor roll every semester. Jonathan Mitchell watched his son interact with Zara, seeing the completion of a circle that had begun with one teenager's courage and expanded to protect millions of children like her. "How's school now?" Devon asked. "Amazing. My teachers actually compliment my hair now. My principal invited me to speak at the school board about cultural pride. And guess what? Zara's excitement was infectious. I'm going to Howard University when I graduate high school. Just like you. I want to study law so I can protect other kids' crowns." The moment was captured by CNN cameras documenting Devon's return to Denver for a special anniversary broadcast. But more than good television, it represented the living legacy of his airport stand, a generation of black youth, growing up protected, confident, authentically themselves. Devon looked at the bronze plaque, then at young Zara with her protected locks. "You know what the best part is?" he told her. "What you'll never have to sit on an airport floor to keep your crown." Zara smiled. "That's because you already did." Reflection on transformation. As they walked through the terminal, Devon reflected on the year that had transformed his life and changed America. The Crown Protection Act had been enforced in over 1,200 cases nationwide, with 97% success rate for plaintiffs. Hair discrimination had become not just illegal, but culturally unacceptable, relegated to the same category as other forms of obvious bigotry. Crown Rise Foundation now operated in 35 states, with legal aid centers, educational programs, and mental health resources for young people facing cultural discrimination. They had helped pass similar legislation in 12 countries, making crown protection a global human rights issue. Devon had been named Time magazine's most influential teenager, given keynote addresses at NAACP, National Convention, been invited to the White House to discuss youth activism and civil rights progress. But perhaps most meaningfully, he had helped create a world where no other 18-year-old would have to sit on an airport floor to protect their crown. Father-son bond. "Dad," Devon said, as they approached their departure gate. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had just let her cut my hair that day?" Jonathan considered the question seriously. "I think about it often, son. If you had chosen compliance over dignity, if you had traded your crown for convenience, the world would have lost something irreplaceable." He paused, looking around the bustling airport, where families of all backgrounds moved freely authentically, without fear of appearance-based discrimination. "But more than that, you would have lost something irreplaceable. The knowledge that your dignity is non-negotiable, that your authenticity is sacred, that your crown is worth protecting, no matter the cost." Lisa Mitchell added her perspective. "What I'm most proud of isn't the laws you helped pass, or the foundation you built, or the speeches you've given. I'm proud that when faced with institutional power trying to diminish you, you found a way to remain both strong and gentle, both resistant and graceful." The flight experience. As their flight boarded first class naturally with a black flight attendant, who complimented Devon's locks and thanked him for his courage, Devon settled into his seat with deep sense of completion. His phone buzzed with messages. "Carlos Rivera, 1 year later. Your airport video has been viewed 47 million times across all platforms. More importantly, it's required viewing in civil rights law classes, cultural sensitivity, training programs, and high school social justice curricula. Your courage is being taught as history now." Dr. Patricia Williams Devon. "I've been teaching constitutional law for 25 years, but I've never seen a single act of individual courage create such systematic change. You didn't just protect your own crown. You protected the constitutional right to authentic existence for millions of Americans. Nana Rose baby. Your great-great-grandfather would be so proud. You carried his crown forward and made sure it could never be cut away again." Universal message and legacy. Devon looked out the airplane window as they lifted off from Denver, the city where his life had changed, where he had learned that sometimes sitting down is the most powerful way to stand up, where he had discovered that protecting one crown means protecting all crowns. Below, the airport grew smaller, but the impact of what had happened there continued to ripple across the world. Children were growing up knowing their natural hair was beautiful and protected. Students were learning that authenticity was not just acceptable, but valuable. Parents were raising children who would never have to choose between their identity and their opportunities. Rebecca Stone's scissors had been intended to diminish a teenager's dignity. Instead, they had unleashed a movement that elevated dignity for an entire generation. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Devon opened his laptop and began working on his next speech, this one for the United Nations Human Rights Council, about the global impact of cultural protection legislation. But first, he typed a simple post on social media. "1 year ago, I sat on an airport floor to protect my crown. Today, millions of crowns are protected by law. Thank you to everyone who stood up by helping me sit down. Your crown is sacred. Wear it proudly. Crown protection #. The post would be shared millions of times, but its message was simple and eternal. Dignity defended becomes dignity multiplied. Authenticity protected becomes authenticity empowered. And sometimes, one teenager's courage to remain themselves can change the world's definition of what belongs." Devon Mitchell had kept his crown. In doing so, he had helped crown a generation. And in protecting his own dignity, he had taught the world that every crown, no matter how different, how natural, how authentic, deserves not just tolerance, but celebration. The teenager who had sat on an airport floor to protect 6 years of growth had grown into a young man whose courage would protect millions of crowns for generations to come. His story had ended where it began, with a young black man flying first class. His crown intact, his dignity unshakable, his authenticity a protected right rather than a negotiable privilege. But now, the entire world was watching over every crown, ensuring that what happened to Devon Mitchell would never happen to anyone else. The crown was no longer just protected. It was celebrated. It was sacred. It was forever free. If this story moved you, if you believe that dignity should never be negotiable, if you think every person deserves to exist authentically without fear or shame, then this message is for you. Hit that like button if you stand with Devon and every young person who has ever been told to change themselves to fit in. Your support means the world. Subscribe to our channel if you want more stories of courage, justice, and people who refuse to let the world diminish their light. We're building a community of people who believe authenticity is beautiful. And please share this video. Share it with your family, your friends, your coworkers, your classmates. Share it because somewhere out there, there's another young person who needs to hear that their crown is sacred, that their story matters, that they never have to choose between being themselves and being successful. Devon Mitchell sat on an airport floor so that millions of others would never have to. His courage became our protection. His dignity became our dignity. His crown became a symbol for every crown that deserves to shine. Remember, your crown reflects your story. Never let anyone convince you to cut your story short. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of the movement that says every crown deserves protection, celebration, and love. Keep your crown high. The world is finally learning to see its beauty.